about my credentials in a bit, but this presentation I put together, I called it Nutrition's Greatest Hits. I don't know, I just kind of picked the title, but what I wanted to do with this is I wanted to cover some of the big topics on nutrition, but cover like the foundational topics. Some of the stuff that often gets glossed over, and then when people go to make diet changes, whether it be because they have a medical issue or they're trying to lose weight, they don't know these foundational things, and then they can easily get suckered into buying, these protein shakes that cost a ton of money, or they end up, just doing something that's not quite healthy. Okay, so first and foremost, I'm going to talk about health, what health is, energy, metabolism, macronutrients. These words are starting to lose you, that's okay, I'm going to define all of this. Portion sizes, eating environments, we're going to talk about sleep for sure, it's so important. And then what the next steps are. So you have all this information, where do we go from there? Okay, just a little bit about myself, just so you didn't think they pulled someone in off the street. My name, of course, is Kristen Carlino. I have been a registered dietitian, nutritionist for about 10 years, I guess a little over 10 years. I went to Rutgers for my undergrad. I did my dietetic internship at the College of St. Elizabeth. That's where I also did my master's in nutrition. I'm currently studying for my board certification in weight management. I think I could pass it right now, but it's a very expensive exam, so I decided to study a little bit before I spent $500 and fail an exam. So currently studying. But at the moment, I run the food pharmacy program with Jersey City Medical Center. I'm also a consulting dietitian for a company called Fits Me Health. We used to be part of Mount Sinai and we broke off in June. It's a cool program where it's virtual weight loss classes. So I work with psychologists and I work with exercise physiologists to help people long-term lose weight. I was also a bariatric dietitian for about 7 years, which is interesting. I mean, that was a cool job to have. It also offers me a little bit more insight into that surgical weight loss aspect. It's probably the most important thing about me is that I love to hike. This is me with my backpacking setup. I was hiking the Pemmy Loop in New Hampshire. I love to hike. I'm a big hiker, which I think is helpful because I'm not just talking about nutrition from a theoretical standpoint, I also put it into practice with these insane backpacking trips. So if anyone's also interested about hiking, feel free to email me. So dietitian versus nutritionist. I always love to talk about this too because there's a lot of misconceptions about these two words. I am a dietitian, and basically as a dietitian you have to meet certain benchmarks. So you have to have a 4-year degree in a nutrition relevant field. It can also be something like chemistry or whatever. There's an alternate path, so if you're currently getting your undergrad in like marketing, you can also get a master's in nutrition. You have to complete a 1,200 hours supervised practice program. It takes about a year to 9 months to do. You have to pass an RD exam. We have to do 75 hours of continued education every 5 years. Currently, to be a dietitian, you have to have a master's. I was grandfathered in, but I got my master's later. Nutritionist, there's no limitation on the title. And I like to make this distinction because there are a lot of people out there who will pay a ton of money to someone calling themselves a nutritionist, and they might not know what they're talking about. Not always. I work with some exercise physiologists who are unbelievably knowledgeable in nutrition. They just didn't do the dietitian course, which is fine. They even know more about nutrition than I do sometimes, but always vet someone's credentials. If you're gonna pay someone money, just double check they know what they're talking about. Technically, after this presentation, you can all call yourselves nutritionists. So, the food pharmacy, what I do over in the Greenville building, we're at 1825 JFK Boulevard. What we do is we take in our primary care patients who need food and have a medical condition. We give them free nutrition counseling and free groceries. So my office is actually a food pantry. It's really cool. We give people food once a month, twice a month as well. It doesn't, they need food, they're gonna get it. So it's just a really wonderful program that the hospital set up. And yeah, I feel like we're doing some good over there. On to healthy. So what is healthy? I like this definition from the World Health Organization because I think it's pretty inclusive. It says that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and societal well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmary. So, oftentimes when we think about health, we'll think about this guy, and we're like, he's so healthy, look at him. But if his body looking like that comes at the expense of his mental health, his social well-being, if he's spending all of his money on looking like that and then he doesn't have any money left at the end of the day, it's not great. So the World Health Organization I love too because it includes people with chronic disease. So you can be healthy with diabetes, you can be healthy with some sort of autoimmune disease. It doesn't mean, if you have one of those illnesses, it doesn't mean that you're not a healthy person. It has to be the whole picture. And with nutrition, it has to be the whole picture as well. It can't just be someone who is eating clean and doing everything they're supposed to do, but if they can't go out with their friends to a restaurant, that's not healthy either. So that's kind of where my nutrition philosophy falls into play. It's more about the total well-being of a person versus, are you eating organic? Are you getting in your macros? Are you going for a 10-mile jog every day? It has to be the whole picture. Talking a bit about body mass index because unfortunately, this is a quick and easy tool that a lot of doctors will use or insurance companies will use BMI often, but it's not the total picture of health. So I'm sure you're familiar with it, but BMI is the ratio of your height to your weight. And then they categorize you underweight, quote unquote normal weight, overweight, or obese based on what that number is. I don't know, should we classify people based on a number and not look at the whole picture? I don't agree with that. And more research is showing BMI is not super accurate. So this one study out of Copenhagen found that the lowest risk of having died from any cause was a BMI of 27. So technically, those people would fall into the overweight category. UC Santa Barbara and UCLA, their study, they looked at 34.4 million Americans considered overweight, and they actually found that the overweight people were healthy. They lacked certain illnesses. So the important thing to know about BMI is that it was created in, the Netherlands. It was created in the Netherlands, looking at mostly white men in their 20s. Didn't really take into account women. Some women were in the study initially, but women naturally have more fat mass. It's normally what we have. But it also did not take into account any races. So BMI, we know, underestimates obesity and overweight in Asian and Pacific Islanders, and it overestimates obesity in Black Americans. So it's just a tool. This number does not dictate whether or not you are healthy in an overall context, even though your insurance company might tell you otherwise. Interestingly, too, a lot of the Olympic athletes are going to fall into this overweight category because it also doesn't take into account muscle mass. So your Olympic swimmers might have a BMI of 27. So a much better tool that we can use is waist circumference. And of course, not always perfect. The World Health Organization defines your waist a little bit higher than the National Institute of Health. health. Long story short though, we're looking for men 40 inches or less, women 35 inches or less. That is just simply because of visceral fat. So people who carry their fat in their midsection, that fat will squeeze the internal organs. But also the location of that fat empties into the portal vein. It's not healthy overall. No one tool is going to be perfect, but it's better than BMI. So weight. The thing I wish everyone knew is that weight is not static. What you are right now, if you hopped on the scale right now, your weight would be much heavier than it was this morning. So your weight changes throughout the day. You can gain up to about 7 pounds throughout the day due to hormonal shifts, due to hydration status, due to the foods that you eat, exercise as well, especially exercise. Because when you work out, you end up breaking down the proteins in your muscles, and then your body has to repair those muscles, so you end up going through an inflammatory response. So, you know when you go to the gym and they talk about having that pump, that's basically an inflammatory response to help you repair your muscles. So, long story short, if you are trying to get the most accurate weight, you want to get it first thing in the morning, right after going to the bathroom, before eating or drinking anything. That's the most accurate weight. So if you go to your doctor at like 3 p.m., you hop on the scale and the person weighing you is like, boy, you've actually gained a couple pounds since the last time you were here. Just put it out of your mouth. Unless it was first thing in the morning, it's not an accurate weight. What I call the triangle of health. If you Google triangle of health, there's a million different ones out there. This is mine. Nutrition, exercise, and sleep. I think these are the 3 important things for health. Of course, nutrition, but sleep often gets left out of the equation. Of course, as college students, I'm sure you're not getting a lot of sleep, but sleep is incredibly important for overall healthy eating and also for overall mental health too. Sleep is wildly important. So I'm definitely going to talk about sleep and how it relates to your weight and all that. Calorie needs. So back up. I feel like it's important to talk about calories because there's a lot of misconceptions about calorie intake. And this is where some of that diet culture, some of that New Year's marketing can really get you. So let me talk about what a calorie is. Calories are energy. So if you're looking at a label, if you're looking at, I don't know, I can't think of a food right now, a Gatorade bottle, and it says 240 calories on there, it basically means 240 units of energy. So calories are energy. We need a certain amount of calories per day for our bodies to function. So our organs to function, for us to breathe, for our hair to grow at night, all the little things that you don't even think about that your body's doing, we need calories for that. And essentially, the average body needs about 1,200 calories a day to function. That's not like sitting at your desk. That's like a comatose person, at least 1,200 calories a day. Unless it's a very small older woman, then it might be a little less. But I say that because 1,200 calories, for whatever reason, has been co-opted by these diet sellers as the amount of calories people need. So a lot of times when people come into me for nutrition counseling, they'll say to me like, I know I need to eat 1,200 calories a day, but I just can't do it. Like I don't have the willpower. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, there's no way you're gonna be able to eat 1,200 calories a day and walk out of this room. Like you need more than that. And I'll get to that calculation, but we need more than 1,200 calories. Weight maintenance, our body's pretty good at maintaining the weight that it is. That's when the calories that we eat match the calories that we burn. Weight gain happens when the calories that we eat are more than what we burn throughout the day. And then of course, weight loss is when our calories are less than what we burn throughout the day. Calories are less. Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about metabolism, and then I'll get to that calorie calculation. how you can figure it out yourself. So your metabolism is a series of chemical reactions that converts food into energy. So I'm sure you've heard people say like, oh, my metabolism sucks, it's so sluggish, you just can't lose weight. That can be true. You can actually ruin your metabolism. But most people, you can get your metabolism on track. The metabolic rate is the speed at which your body burns energy. So this is your total energy expenditure, like your whole metabolic rate. So this is what your body's doing. So this orange section is called your basal metabolic rate. This is, again, the boring stuff that your body's doing. So it's, you know, having your lungs breathe. It's making new red blood cells. It's growing fingernails. Like, it's everything that your body's doing if you were in a comatose state. That's your BMR. It's most of your metabolic rate. We have very little influence over our BMR. So, you know, someone who's taller is going to have a higher BMR than someone who's shorter. Men tend to have a bigger BMR than women do. Older people have a smaller BMR than younger people do. One thing we can influence, though, with BMR is our muscle mass. So your muscles burn more calories than fat does. So if you're strength training and you're building up that muscle mass, you can slightly increase this BMR. So at rest, you're burning more calories than if you didn't have that muscle mass. So that's kind of the one thing we have control over. Next up, I love this one. The next one is the thermic effect of food. When you eat food, your body has to break it down, absorb it, and transport it. And you need calories to do that. So the mere act of eating food burns calories in and of itself. If you eat a massive meal, you can't really expand it. It's always going to be about 10%. But I just love the idea that eating will help you burn calories. Next up is exercise. So this light blue is the NEAT, so the non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Basically, that's like fidgeting, that's like picking up your phone and looking at it, that's you know, non-exercise activity that you're doing. Getting up, walking to the bathroom, coming back. The small part up at the top is the one we have the most influence on. That's exercise. So that can be bigger, that can be smaller. But yeah, this is what makes up your metabolic rate. So how many calories you're burning throughout the day. And again, when people say like, oh, I have a bad metabolism, I don't know. I always like to dive into that a little bit more. People who are chronic dieters, like people who do crash diets all the time, they can really slow this metabolic rate. That's actually a thing that can happen. But for the most part, your metabolic rate is kind of trucking along. It is determined by genetics. I mean, some people do just have a really great metabolic rate, and some people don't. So it's interesting. But the good news is that we can influence this by exercise and by our muscle mass. Figuring out your calorie needs. I'm not always the biggest fan of like doing a calorie calculation. It's not for everyone, but I think sometimes it can be helpful to clear up what your calorie needs are. For example, like some people come into my office and they're like 1,200 calories, I know that's what I need, and I'm like, no, you need 2,000 actually. So sometimes it can be helpful. It's a very complex equation. In your packet, I included the link to a website that'll do it for you. It's much easier. This is the equation. For weight stuff, I use an equation called Mifflin-St. Jeor. It's the most accurate when we're talking about weight needs. What it is, it takes this into account, like your height, your weight, your age, and then you multiply it by an activity factor. So if you are sedentary, if you're sitting most of the day, you use 1.2. If you have light activity, so on and so on. This is what the calculator I linked you to looks like. So you put in your information, it shoots out what your BMR is, and then you can figure out what your exercise amount is. So if you exercise 4 to 5 times a week, it's about 2,300 for this particular person. I will say there's a really classic study. It was published in 1992. That's how classic it is. It's probably older than some of you. But it was in the New England Journal of Health. And what they did is they asked all of these people to track their calories and to track their exercise. And what they found was that when people reported their calorie intake, they underestimated it by 1,000. And when they calculated the calories they burned through exercise, they overestimated it by 250 calories. So, with that said, whenever I have someone that identifies their activity factor, I always tell them, just bump it down, because you might be overestimating. So if you work out 4 to 5 times a week, I would just bump it down to the 1 to 3 times a week. It's only about like 150 calorie difference, but I will say this is for weight maintenance. So it's good to know what your body needs to sustain itself, just to keep the weight the same. Weight loss, I don't like to talk to people about weight loss unless they're specifically coming to me for weight loss, but again, just to clear up some myths about weight loss, what we normally have people do is take that number that they just calculated and then subtract 500 calories if they're hoping to lose half a pound a week, or 1,000 if they're hoping to lose 1 pound a week. Let me just clear that up though. So most people jump into the 1 pound a week. They're like, I want to lose 5 pounds, I want to do it ASAP. If you have only a few pounds to lose, or even for most people, you're better off going with a smaller amount and setting your weight loss expectations lower. Sometimes I'll even have people do only 250 and they're losing 1/4 of a pound a week. But 1,000 calorie reduction is massive. That's a lot. And our bodies are designed for the long haul. So our bodies still are in caveman times. It wants to maintain the weight that it's at for survival. So what happens is, very naturally, I don't know if any of you have experienced this before, I know I have. You cut your calories drastically because your goal is, I want to go to the beach and I want to look good and I want to lose some weight. You cut your calories drastically. You do it for a couple of days and then you binge eat on the 3rd day. And then people come to me and they're like, I have no willpower, I can't stick with the diet. It's because it's not sustainable. It has to be sustainable. 500 calories for half a pound of weight loss a week is great. If you're only looking to lose 5 pounds, maybe it's 250. I'm not saying anyone in here needs to lose weight, but again, I like to clear up nutrition myths, so that's weight loss. This person was looking to lose weight. Let's say they don't do a ton of activity. Their calories about 1,900. They would probably cut it to, oh my gosh, quick math, 1,400 is what they would drop it to. Again, dropping it by 1,000, expecting a pound of weight loss a week, that would bring them to 900. It's not sustainable. Realistic weight loss, about 2 to 4 pounds of weight loss per month. So when you read, I go to Acme for the food pharmacy like 3 times a week, and the magazine covers are always like, lose 10 pounds this week and feel better. That's not possible. This is a pretty accurate depiction of weight loss. You're gonna go down, but you're also gonna go up. This makes perfect sense. As long as the line is trending downward, that's good. But sometimes too, like this person crying right here because they gained weight, it's also possible that they exercised a lot and now they're feeling that inflammatory response and their weight went up. It's not a bad thing. This is a massive review article. They looked at 198 studies in this, and they were trying to find what the overall key to weight loss was. No matter what diet someone was following. They tried to figure out what was the key to it. And the key was dropping those calories. So it's not anything super special. None of these quote unquote diets are going to give you something super special that the other one isn't giving you except reducing your calories. I'm kind of simplifying it right now. The thing that was key for calorie restriction, it had to be sustainable to the person. So if we told, I'll use keto as an example because it's the best one. Keto diet appeared to have a slight competitive edge for weight loss. It had by far the greatest dropout of any group that they studied. I think like 80% of the participants dropped out of the study because it's really difficult. So if you are trying to make some sort of change to your eating or to what have you, it has to work for you. So if I have a single mother of 6 come to me, she's like, I need to lose weight. I'm not recommending the keto diet because she's got to count everything meticulously. I'm not recommending paleo because that, can get really complex. I'm recommending a version of what she's currently doing, just slightly altered so that it's easier. Meal timing is important. I mean, I could spend a few hours on the studies dedicated to meal timing. I'm gonna just keep it kind of simple because for the most part, all of these people are following the same calorie needs, but they're doing it in different ways. So if you're someone that does not like to eat breakfast, even though I feel like you should eat a breakfast, it's okay. You can divide up your calories this way. If you're someone, again, that's starting to work out, you're feeling hungry often, maybe these small 300 calorie meals that are focused on protein are better for you. That's actually oftentimes how bodybuilders will do it to get in that protein that they need. Most people fall in the middle, but it could be any of these. It could be a version of this that's not even up on the board here. What to eat. All food is made up of 3 things. We've got carbs, we've got protein, we've got fats. How am I doing on time? Okay. Carbs, protein, fats. So all food is made up of one or a mixture of these macronutrients. We call these the macronutrients because they're the big things that you eat. The micronutrients are like vitamins, minerals, that kind of stuff. Macronutrients we need in big amounts every day. Most meat foods are purely protein, but they also have some fat. Bread, mostly carbs, but they also have a little bit of protein. So there's always going to be a little bit of overlap that goes on. But it's important to know what they are. This is the percentage of our daily intake that's taken up by macronutrients. So most people, the majority of what they're eating is carbohydrates. And that shocks a lot of people. Because people will say to me, like, I don't eat a lot of bread, I don't eat a lot of rice or pasta, but coming back here, fruits have carbs in them. Vegetables also have a little bit of carbs. I don't even think I see vegetables on here, but beans, nuts, so carbs actually do make up a lot of our diet. The food pyramid, if you guys remember the food pyramid, that's a really good example of someone taking the science and really kind of misrepresenting it. So it showed all like the bread and pasta on the bottom. What they were trying to show is that the majority of what we eat are carbs, but when they showed it, it made it look like you should be eating a lot of rice and pasta throughout the day. So it didn't actually make sense. Fat, we also take in a fair amount of fat, and then protein is pretty small. Someone who's eating a vegan diet, their carbs are going to be higher. And that also is counterintuitive to a lot of people because they think of carbs as being bad. But vegans, the traditional vegans, now we have a lot of people who say they're vegan, but the traditional vegans were very healthy. They're some of the healthiest people in the world. And they were taking in mostly carbs. Some fat and some protein as well, but they were following a plant-based way of eating. keto's so hard to follow. Carbs are 5%. That's a traditional keto diet. That's why it's so hard to follow. And the thing is that, and by the way, I actually have an aunt that does keto. She has an autoimmune disease, and it's really, really helped her. That's great. I mean, keto works for some people. It doesn't often work for, you know, the single mother of like multiple children. This won't work for them. In general, I love this plate. This plate, half of it is vegetables, a quarter of the plate is carbohydrates, a quarter of the plate is protein. This, I think, is a really great guideline for how to portion your plate. In general, I don't want you carrying around like measuring cups or anything like that. This is just a good way, like if you're at a barbecue or if you're at a restaurant, it's just a good guideline. Like if half your plate is veggies, cool. Quarter carbs, a quarter protein. That's normally how we know you're having enough. So this plate follows that guideline. And once you understand that, all these other plates start to open up. So all of these fit that guideline of half the plate veggies, a quarter protein, a quarter carbs. This also fits that. So I just stole this picture off Instagram, but I love this picture because it's just so realistic. Like if you're running between classes or, you know, I teach at night, so sometimes I don't want to cook. This fits that plate. You know, you've got about a cup or so of vegetables, you've got a protein, you've got your carbs, that's fine. So when you understand like what these plates look like, you can really simplify it. This is fine, this is healthy as well. The difference in portions is also helpful, so knowing that plate portioning is good because then you can control your portions. There's nothing wrong with either of these plates, but knowing, you know, half this plate is veggies, you've got your protein, all right, you've got an avocado there, but that's healthy. You know, this is portioned according to that plate a little bit more than this is, where the fat starts to take over more of the plate. 710 calories is perfectly fine for a breakfast if you're going out for a run or doing exercise. But again, it is important to know the big calorie differences. Same thing here. This plate is kind of portioned where half of it is vegetables, a quarter protein, a quarter carbs. This one, the carbs start to take over a little bit more. I guess this is chicken. Carbs start to take over a little bit more, so you get more calories in. So again, nothing wrong with this. Certainly nothing wrong with this, but if you think you're eating 380 calories and you're actually eating 750, that's where the discrepancy comes into play. You can also apply it to snacks. Nothing wrong with either of these, but just knowing that like the fats have a little bit more carbs in them, or more calories in them, so you're gonna get more calorie rich that way versus that smaller one. It's actually a great snack before a workout. This probably would not fuel you for terribly long, but again, just knowing what the calorie difference is can be really helpful. So this is kind of the plate that I was talking about, half fruits and veggies, a quarter protein, a quarter carbs. You know, you're eating that, but let's say one day you're doing kind of an intense workout, you're going for a run, or you're lifting, your needs can change. So you need a little bit more carbs, possibly a little bit more protein if you're working out. So it's a good example of someone, again, who did a fair amount of physical activity throughout the day. And then, let's say you were doing a really big workout, like you ran a half marathon, or I don't know, you went for a big hike, like that day I did that huge hike. You're gonna need a lot more carbs. So I'm showing all of this. I know this is super complex. I mean, I'm really like throwing some complex nutrition stuff at you, but I'm showing you all of this to show you that it doesn't have to be static. Things can change. They can really change. They can really adjust. One day, you might need that plate on the left. The next day, you might be really going for it. You might need this plate on the right. Protein. Quickly with protein, just like with calories, sometimes I think it's really interesting to do your protein calculation, and I included it in that packet. But oftentimes I'll get people that come to me and they'll say to me like, I am starving all day long. I try to control myself. I am so hungry. I don't know what to do. And then when I go through what they're eating, they're often lacking in protein. So I think it's a good idea to do your protein calculation occasionally. Basically what it is your weight in pounds divided by 2.2. That gives you kilograms. And then your kilograms times your activity level factor. Most people it's 0.8. That'll give you normal amount. Most active adults, if you're exercising, it might be anywhere from 0.8 to 1. You can also find online calculators for this as well. But for example, if your weight is 160, you would divide it by 2.2. That gives you 72.72 kilograms, which just kind of worked out well.
This would be how much protein we should be eating?
Per day, yes.
Per day.
Yep, the grams of protein. So this person needs 58 grams of protein per day. And every once in a while, I'll have someone say like, that's insane, that's an insane number. And then we figure out how to do it and they're like, oh, it's not insane. And now I feel full and I was missing out on protein. So there's a lot of different sources of protein. We often just think of meat. There are plant sources of protein as well. This picture was made by a dietitian in Australia, which is why it has kangaroo on it. And I always think it's really funny, so I always include it. Quark yogurt, I don't know what that is, but. The cool thing about your body is that it kind of knows what you need. So a serving of protein is about the size of your palm. Now, if you're looking at your hand and you're like, well, I have giant hands or I have really tiny hands, that's fine because that's your body size. So if you have a big hand, you need a little bit more protein for your body size. If you have a small hand, you need a little bit less. But most people's palm is about 3 ounces. So, if you're like trying to size up how much chicken you should have or fish, it's about the size of your palm. You're doing okay. Eating environment. This stuff fascinates me, the eating environment. Story short, Pavlov had a dog. When he would ring a bell, nothing would happen. Then he conditioned the dog to eat food and hear a bell ringing. So then, eventually, when the dog heard the bell, he would start to salivate, thinking there was food coming. It was just this unconscious thing that happened. What does this have to do with nutrition? Well, I sometimes ask people, do you have a bell? Is there something that sets off this unconscious desire to eat? When I ask that, most people say no, and then I'll remind them, like, what about the couch and the TV? Do you ever find yourself feeling hungry watching TV? You're a big boredom eater, you're a nighttime eater, that's huge, especially in my weight loss classes, that's huge. Nighttime eating, carb eating. I had a woman once who just cut down on her carb eating. I was like, let's not eat in the car. Let's only eat inside. One of the biggest factors in what we eat is access, convenience, and ease. And I'm sure we all know this, but the ease of eating makes it so that we eat more. This is a cool study. So what they did here is they had people in an office, and on the secretary's desk, they put Hershey Kisses in either a clear jar or in an opaque jar that they couldn't see through.
Right.
And the people who passed the clear jar ate 47% more Hershey Kisses than the opaque jar. So seeing food is one of our biggest indicators. Don't have to be like cutting back on foods. I don't like to work from like this restrictive mentality where it's like you can't eat this, you can't eat this. So sometimes I'll take the approach with people and I'll say like, well, if you're trying to eat less potato chips, why don't you put the potato chips in this dark bin and put it on a high shelf so it's harder for you to get to, you can't see it. It's still there, like you can have it if you want it, but it's just a strategy. Like we know human nature, if it sees food, it's gonna want it. So that's just something we can do. And then we can also put the foods that we're trying to eat more of, the fruits and vegetables, in a spot that's easy for us to get to. So we open the fridge, it's right there. You know, we have the cut up fruits and veggies right there when you open it up, and you take the lo mein and you put it in the back. Like, just that little bit of inconvenience to have to reach over stuff and get it. Like, research backed will make people not eat food as much. Hunger scale, this is complex. I sometimes the last time I did this with a group of people, there was a woman who just started crying because she didn't know, because of diets and diet culture, she had stuffed down her hunger so much, she could no longer recognize hunger. So ideally we want to live in the zone where we're kind of hungry and then we get kind of full. When we get out of that zone and we're uncomfortably hungry or uncomfortably full, we make not bad decisions, but we make the decisions that we wouldn't otherwise make. So I often ask people, are you hungry enough to eat an apple? That's a good judge of your hunger. An apple is kind of a neutral food. Nobody's ever craving it. No one ever hates it. But if you're hungry enough to eat an apple, you might actually be hungry and need to eat. But if you're sitting in front of the TV and you're like, I don't really eat right now. Should I have some potato chips? You ask yourself, am I hungry enough to eat an apple? And the answer is no. Then you can really cycle through what's really going on. Am I tired? Am I bored? Am I thirsty? Am I emotional? So it's just a pretty cool test, and I did include the hunger scale in this packet. That's actually, it's a function of leptin. Leptin is a satiety hormone. So when we eat, our fat cells actually do stuff, but our fat cells send leptin to the brain to tell the brain, like, hey, we're full, we've ate, we're satisfied, but it takes leptin a while to get up to the brain. So that's why it takes 20 minutes. Yeah, so when we don't sleep well, our hunger is increased. So it's harder for people to eat well because they're craving those higher calorie things. Caffeine is incredibly stimulating. Some people need to stop it around noon. Like if you're really caffeine sensitive, you might have to stop caffeine at noon. Chocolate though has caffeine in it, and most, a lot of desserts have chocolate. So sometimes when I have a caffeine sensitive person and they're having chocolate as a dessert, it just doesn't bode well for them. Alcohol, this is fascinating. Yeah, so alcohol can help you get to sleep. Definitely, if alcohol makes you sleepy, makes perfect sense. It actually disrupts your REM sleep. So your REM sleep is the part of sleep. It's important, it's what helps you solidify your memories, it's where you do all of your repair. So if you've ever been, we enter REM sleep a certain amount of times throughout the night. So if you wake up at like 3 in the morning and you're just like, I don't know why I wake up at 3 in the morning every night, you're between REM sleeps. If you ever get woken up and you're like, oh, you're so frazzled and startled, you were probably in the middle of a REM sleep. But alcohol disrupts REM sleep, you don't enter it, so it causes you to have worse sleep. Balanced meals are important. Eating too few calories or too many calories throughout the day can disrupt your sleeping. Magnesium can be helpful for sleep. So we get magnesium through dark greens, beans, nuts, and seeds. I'm not huge on taking supplements. I feel like people should get their nutrition from food. But magnesium is actually a pretty good supplement for sleep. I'm not a fan of taking melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone that naturally helps you sleep. But it can actually, I don't think it's a great idea to be taking hormones willy-nilly. Magnesium is a better option. If you're interested in getting better sleep and taking magnesium for sleep, you want to look for magnesium glycinate. Magnesium citrate is a laxative. I give this sleep talk all the time. I recently had a patient at the food pharmacy who was going to get a colonoscopy for severe stomach issues. She recently started taking magnesium, and I was like, wait a minute, bottle, are you taking magnesium glycinate or citrate? She called me, she was taking magnesium citrate. So she was taking a laxative basically. So she actually did not have to get the colonoscopy. It felt so good. I was like, nutrition saves the day. So the blue lights do suppress melatonin. Melatonin is the sleep hormone. The two biggest things that signal to the body it's time to wake up are light and food. So I sometimes have people who eat in the middle of the night because they're like, oh, it'll help me go to sleep, it's calming. It actually does the opposite. So if you're eating too close to bedtime, that can keep you up. But yeah, the blue light, you can get special glasses. That's what I recommend to people instead of the red lights. You can get like the blue light glasses. You can also switch your phone to that orange mode, stuff like that. Sleep hygiene, it doesn't mean like hygiene, but just like having a sleep routine can help you go to sleep. Sleep environment, making sure your sleeping environment is very comfortable, light. The blackout curtains can be really big. Exercise helps you sleep, so if you're exercising during the day, but if you're doing it right before bed, that can disrupt it. And I know this is not nutrition, but sleep ties so closely into nutrition that I always like to talk about sleep. What do we do now? So first and foremost, I always like to tell people you don't have to be perfect. We talk about sometimes the rule of 80-20. So as long as 80% of the time you're making a good effort to eat nutritious food, the other 20%, you can have pizza, you can have pancakes, like you can have things that you enjoy. You're not gonna be perfect 100% of the time. And this at least frees you up, like if you wanna go out with your friends or if you wanna have something that you really like. So 80-20 is what that's realistic. The other thing too, so with any sort of change, whether it be a nutrition goal or anything you want to change in your life, I never rely on motivation. That's the big thing I tell people. Motivation ebbs and flows. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. It's good to capitalize on motivation. If you're motivated, you can think about a bunch of stuff that you want to change, but the more important thing is to pick small changes and make them habits. Small changes, slowing down at meal times, eating your vegetables first, adding 10 more minutes of activity throughout the day. Remember, it just has to be sustainable, the things that you're doing. So if you set this goal to I had a woman once that wanted to go to Orange Theory 5 days a week. And that just felt so unsustainable. And it lasted for a week. But, if we replace it with 30 minutes of walking, that's a little bit more sustainable because you can do it throughout the day.